Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play Chaos Head. If you hear a fan in the background, I apologize in advance. It's fucking hot where I am. And the room I'm in doesn't have the best AC, to be completely honest, for a room of its size. So I've got a ceiling fan going and then a floor fan as well. And even though the floor fan is on the other side of the room, it's a bit of a noisy one. Let's go ahead and get the timer started and continue on. Also, sorry there was no part last week. My recording schedule got a little bit screwed up because I'd accidentally recorded the wrong series at one point, and yeah, didn't quite have the time to go ahead and record both Baldur's Gate and this. So yeah. Now, when it was too late, Rimi's words sank into my heart. She was a true meddler. What enabled her to fight so hard? What enabled her to act so much on behalf of others?
私はタクの味方だから。
My memories of Rimi revived within me. The brief amount of time we had spent together up until the present, the emotions hidden behind each word as she uttered.
私が一緒にいてあげる。
The past year and a half, if I was to say what I'd done, it'd be ESO and RMT and Aragay and little else. I'd immersed myself in them and remained shut up in my base, rarely going to school, not attempting to speak with anyone. Born into this world, I'd been throwing my time away as if I were dead. But this last month or so had been different. One of the results had been her lying to me.
朝一緒に学校行って。
But she'd stayed together with the likes of me.
学校では休み時間にどうでもいいこと話して。
She'd pacified me as I quivered in fear.
お昼休みは一緒にご飯食べて。
She'd supported my no-good self. She'd encouraged me.
夕方一緒に帰って。
She'd embraced me.
帰るついでにたまにどこかのお店に寄ったりして。
She'd shown the meaning of human warmth to a delusionary existence like me.
タクの部屋でちょっとだけおしゃべりして。
She could have erased me, but instead she tried to protect me.
それでまた明日ねって手を振って別れて。
She made memories for me.
そんなのでいいなら私いくらでもしてあげるよ。
Even now, I could think vividly back on my time together with Rimi, out of my mere year and a half long life.
そういうの結構憧れなんだ。
Rimi's little gestures, the scent of Rimi's hair, the sound of Rimi's breath. Okay, yeah, and I accidentally double-pressed earlier. Excuse me, the sound of Rimi's breath, the light in Rimi's eyes, Rimi's cheerful voice, Rimi's tender warmth. Ah, I see. I'm in love with Rimi. How indescribably creepy. I smiled bitterly at my own creepiness. A delusionary existence falling in love? Could even a delusionary existence harbor the emotion of loving someone? Or was it a hallucination? I didn't know. But I wanted to stay true to this feeling. Rimi regarded me as a friend. She definitely didn't have any awareness of me as the opposite sex. An otaku freak like me wouldn't suit Rimi well to begin with. But even if it were unrequited love, even if it were mere self-satisfaction, even though I was a delusionary existence, I wanted to at least do something for somebody. Do something for Rimi, and then disappear. It was creepy for a creepy otaku to be in love. It was creepy for a delusionary existence to be in love. So what? Even if it were disgusting. even if it would never be returned. I didn't want to dispose of this feeling as a hallucination or a delusion. Our memories of this past month were a form of local shared recognition between the two of us, me and Remy. Even if everything was make-believe, these memories and the emotions born from their accumulation were the real thing.
世界を救ってほしい。
Said Shogun. I shook my head.
僕は勇者じゃない。人間でもない。そんな僕に世界を救えとか何を考えてるの？
君には本当に悪いと思ってるけど、君にやってもらうしかないんだ。
自分に謝るなんてバカみたいだ。
I glared at the real me. The real me accepted my imposter's gaze.
僕は君が嫌いだ。
僕は君が羨ましいよ。
僕は世界のためになんか頑張らない。世界を救うとか、そんなことどうでもいい。
I'd be the one to decide the meaning behind my birth.
ただ、僕はリミを助ける。
ありがとう。
The sounds from the area around me returned. The disorder there was increasingly accelerating. At this point, it had become a riot. In my surroundings were the smell of blood, roars, screams, moans, and a howling, mechanical sound. These things overflowed everywhere.
理想度を手に入れる方法を教えて。
君はすでにそれを知っているはずだよ。
I raised my line of sight. I searched for the shape of a sword blending into the scenery. Rocks flew through the air, smoke from tear gas bombs climbed higher, and nearby people crashed into me over and over. Under these conditions, I made my consciousness focus and sought the sword I had glimpsed for only a second before from the roof of Zero Front. Or O Front. It's really freaking hard to tell because that looks like it's an O, not a zero. I should be able to see it. Without a doubt, it was somewhere out there. A part of the scenery, mixed in with the rest. I catch sight of it. Your D-sword is always by your side.
見つけた。
The building to the right of 107, a colorful billboard ranged vertically along it. It appeared as a sword to me. Tension, my breath caught. I'd been able to perceive it in the form of a sword before as well, when I saw it from the roof of Zero Front. But at the time, I'd ultimately failed to grasp onto it.
自分の意志を強く持つんだ。迷っちゃダメだからね。君にはもう剣を手に入れる資格は十分にある。
Standing in place, I extended my hand. In order to rescue someone precious to me, I needed that sword no matter what. No matter what. I clenched my back teeth together. It was different from before. My heart was so serene, even I found myself startled by it. I wasn't afraid. I couldn't afford to be afraid. But I wasn't cool-headed. There was an emotion simmering, boiling hard inside me. There was something I had to do. No matter what.
掴むんだ。
There were roughly 100 meters between me and 107. I held my palm out so it appeared to overlap the sword. I closed my hand. Though I should have closed my hand around empty space, I felt something. It was neither cold nor hot, neither hard nor soft. Seizing it, I slowly pulled it toward me. Ripples rose in the air. It came slipping out from within them. All too long to be called a sword. So slender it seemed about to break any moment. Brimming with phantasmal dignity. Revealing absolutely no surface resplendence. Possessing both a pure malice as though the soul had been sucked out of it. And an awe-inspiring, fluent elegance. It linked within my exulting heart, and the foreboding pattern of flames in its hilt quivered. I felt not a trace of its weight. In fact, it was as though it had become one with my hand, as though it had been there from the start, as though it were a part of my body. I had no real sense that I was holding a sword. This is a D-sword. I clenched it tight with both hands. Now I should be able to real boot it as well. If it attained the shape or the shared recognition of those in the area, this sword would bring its shape forth into reality. I didn't know how to do it. I simply prayed. Becoming real, I shouted at it internally. I would no longer waver. Are we trying to Dragon Ball Z this? As though answering my cry, the D-sword began glowing faintly. The pattern of flames on its hilt transformed into real flames, enveloping the sword. I felt no heat. At last, those flames were sucked away into the swords entirely. And with a violent impact, the D-sword became clothed in scarlet light. A portion of the people nearby spotted my sword and went dumb with shock. But it was only a portion of the whole. The others were fixated on hitting and slandering each other. The riot didn't seem likely to calm
こ
down.
の暴動を引き起こしているポーターたちを探すんだ。彼らの持つ機械を破壊すればバイオリズムの高騰も収まる。
ポーター。
ノア2の端末としての存在。君はすでにそのヒントを見てきたはずだよ。君の頭の中にそれは記憶として刻まれている。
I roused it, all that which I had seen.
食い終って食い終って
ようやく尻尾を出したんだな。そいつを掴んで離さねえようにしないとね。
I don't think we would have seen this scene.
辛いんですね。
Like, I mean, we as the players saw it, yes, but as the main character, no.
有限会社し聞いたことあるか
Yeah, our main character is somehow seeing scenes that there was no possible way for him to have ever seen them.
返して7のバングル返して
地点 L2 の8 0.62 メガ GE ハイスコアです。
どんな手品だこれは。
のぞ
我が社ではポーターと呼んでいます。言い換えればマインドコントロールのための部隊と。
Sorry, I need to lower the volume. Where the hell is it? Configuration, screen, sound, and background music.
たところでしょうか。
A little loud for my liking compared to what I have the other settings at. The things I had unconsciously been watching the whole time. Things I had unconsciously spied on via thoughts the whole time.
僕は盗撮野郎ってことか。お似合いだね。
Hey, now, we're not a peeping Tom because we never did anything that a peeping Tom is known for. As I laughed self-mockingly, Shogun calmly gave me
チャ
directions.
ンネルを開放してポーターたちの心を読むんだ。コズピーのようにね。彼らはこのスクランブル交差点のどこかにいる。居場所を探り当てて。
I opened my channel, because, we know how to do that. I didn't think about how to do it. Without taking conscious heed of it, I enacted it through my senses alone. Immediately afterward, the hearts of the vast number of people in this place, their negative emotions, became visible and poured into me all at once. Hostility, hatred, jealousy, carnal desire, obsequiousness? I got no idea. Cowardice, frivolity, contamination. Really? Contamination? Okay. Cunning, obscenity, disgrace, crudity, lust, insanity, the will to kill. a manifestation of the ugly emotions people hid from others, far more direct and atrocious and revolting than anything communicated in words. Every manner of negative emotion people embrace within them became a torrent of images, swallowing up my heart, breaking me, violating me. They bathed me in a despising gazes, abused me with words of contempt, spat at me, peeled my nails off, pummeled my cheeks with their fists countless times, kicked me in the buttocks, ripped my hair out, bit my nose to pieces, gouged out my eyeballs, pulled my tongue out, sucked up my blood, poured scalding water on me and burned me, raped me in the ass, smashed my genitals, ripped off all the skin on my body, severed my arms, broke the bones of every part of my body, struck me with blunt objects, stabbed me with blades, dug out my intestines, strangled me tight around the neck, made vast beasts devour my flesh, pushed me off from high places, drowned me in water, burned my whole body in flames. Once I tuned into it, my heart would break. I seemed about to go crazy. Gritting my teeth, I frantically held up my own will. Could it be that Kozapi had constantly been living under these circumstances?
見るべき妄想をコントロールするんだ。全てを受信しちゃダメだ。標的を絞り込んで音を頼りにするんだ。
The sound. I listened desperately, enduring the negative delusions pressing in on me. All I could hear were voices. I blocked them out. I sought out the sound. I heard it. A mechanical noise. Sarah had called it the sound that would kill me. The sound also appeared in my memories, the ones I'd obtained by recording the thoughts of others. A porter's rucksack made this noise, and Senna had used her D-sword to destroy it. When I concentrated on that noise, the delusions I heard were,
信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ
信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ
multiple voices. There was more than one porter in this place.
3人いるみたいだね。
Stifling my breath, I took a step forward. A chaotic flock of people, this pedestrian scramble without so much as a fragment of law and order, where they walked to wherever they liked and struck out at one another. It would be a trial to go straight forward. I hacked into the delusions of the people leading up to my target. The people standing before my line of sight shifted positions slightly. A single path opened up there. About 50 meters ahead of it was a lone man. Now all obstacles between me and him had been expelled. Our eyes met. He was plump and wore a suit and had a rucksack on his back.
一人目
I ran. Through the crowd, without bumping into anyone, straight ahead, as the crow flies, dragging along my D-sword. Having noticed me, the porter grew flustered, turned his back and attempted to flee, but I wouldn't let him. In the same way as Senna, I swept my D-sword much longer than I was tall, horizontally. As before, I sensed no weight in it. I could manipulate it as if it were a part of my own hand. The tip of my D-sword dug into the rucksack, as if melting away at a high temperature. The rucksack's contents burst with steam. The man slumped down in place and trembled, holding his head. Without giving him a glance, I headed for the second one. Below O-front. Again, all obstacles on the way there disappeared. They were constructing a road for me. The man who stood beyond it, overly thin, he wore a checkered shirt and jeans. He had long hair and sickly white skin. He cradled a bag into his chest as if he prized it. Upon catching sight of me, he tried to blend into the crowd. Before then, I threw my D-sword. Fly. I had a delusion that it disregarded the laws of physics and accelerated as it soared forward, horizontal to the earth. Subtly correcting its path along the way, it pierced the porter's bag with intimidable accuracy. A faint flash burst forth. The man fell down on the spot. One more. Running up to the fallen man, I retrieved my D-sword. The third was in front of the Hachiko statue. I had met that porter several times before. No, to put it more accurately, I was used to talking to her on a daily basis. The waves of people parted. For the third time, a path manifested, a perfectly straight line. At the end of that path was a woman who stood out very much, a woman in white clothing.
あなたが3人目です。葉月さん。いや、グリム。
Wait, we know Grimm's a woman? That's surprising. Oh. Well then, the nurse who had smiled kindly at the hospital. Now she glared at me with a piercing look in her eyes. She held an oversized handbag. There was most likely a Noah 2 terminal inside it.
真実を彼女がしてきたことをこの場にいる人たちに提示すればこの熱病のような混乱は収まる。彼女がグリムならこれまでの不自然な言動に君は気づいているはず。
Sorry about that, I accidentally double pressed. What's she done? If she is Grimm, you must realize how suspicious her actions and words have been up until now.
僕が最初に君に接触した時のことを思い出して。僕は君に貼り付け事件の予言をした。君への継承だった。でも僕よりも先に貼り付けを予言した人間がいる。
I remembered our exchange in that chat. But shortly before Shogun began talking to me, Grimm had left the room after appending a single joking image. That drawing, the one Hazuki had scribbled in patient's records, it wasn't exactly skillfully drawn, but what it stood for was the staking. And when Grimm first explained the new gen cases to me, he'd said, "They're all in your neighborhood." Heh. Never mind the fact that I'd never said a word to him about living in Shibuya. And in our chat, just a few hours before, Grimm had let slip words that suggested he knew I was Nishijo Takumi. You're a celeb, so you'll be the center of everyone's attention. The second time I went to the hospital, Hazuki had said,
高階先生はもういません。
and a week later, Dr. Takashino was discovered as a corpse. I sucked in a breath.
あの人が真犯人。
I would know if I had looked into her heart.
信仰の救いあれ。
Hazuki Shino stood in the... Hazuki Shino stood in one of the operating rooms in her workplace, AH Tokyo General Hospital, late at night, an operating room belonging to the surgical department. Atop the bed was the form of a young man, Konoe Shizuo. Fed sleeping pills, he was in a state of clouded consciousness.
信仰の救いあれ。
Repeating the same words over and over like a Buddhist chant, Hazuki rubbed her enormously swollen stomach. She slowly shed her nurse's whites. She sat down on the operating table and took up a scalpel.
救いあれ。
Ah, so crazy nurse. And without anesthesia, she slit open her own belly. If any surgeon or obstetrician saw it, all would laud her as having nigh genius abilities. Though she was a nurse, she possessed a startling faculty for surgical operations, and while enduring the pain of cutting her own body open sans anesthesia, Hazuki made an incision into her abdomen with commendable skill. Blood and amniotic fluid came leaking out of the wound. As her face contorted in pain, Hazuki at last thrust her own hand into her abdomen. She took out a bloodied fetus. Still not fully developed, the fetus had already perished in the process of being forcibly removed. Cutting the umbilical cord, Hazuki lovingly cradled her child, then laid it on a platform beside the operating table and began suturing her wound. Upon completing that step in less than an hour, she rose from the operating table while bearing up under an excessive pain in her abdomen, An ordinary person would have passed out ages ago, and holding the fetus, stood beside the man lying in bed. She looked down at the unconscious man's face with bloodshot eyes. She deliberately stuck a scalpel into his stomach. With a violence far separate from the delicacy and accuracy with which she had slit her own stomach. Pain made the man awaken, but both his arms and legs were bound firmly to the legs of the bed, and he had no way to escape. Paying no heed to his weeping and shrieking, Hazuki pulled at the scalpel she had thrust in him. It tore his skin and flesh, blood sprayed out, landing on her face.
信仰の救いをあなたに。
Did I say crazy? I meant batshit insane. She put both hands to her victim's wound. With a coerciveness, it would be safe to call forcible. She spread the wound open on both sides. The sound of meat ripping echoed through the operating room. The man's body convulsed as he fell into a cycle of blacking out, then reviving in pain. Contemplating the sufficiently opened wound, Hazuki smiled gently, and she took her own child, which she had removed shortly before, and shoved it inside.
信仰の救いあれ。
Is it repeating, or... Tsukishino stood in one of the operating rooms in her workplace, AH Tokyo General Hospital, late at night, an operating room belonging to the surgical department. Okay, it's showing a different one this time. Atop the bed was the form of her colleague, a psychiatrist, Takashina Fumio. He was strapped down to the bed, but he wasn't merely bound there. His brain lay exposed in his head. His cranium had been cleanly cut away from above his eyes.
高階先生に信仰の救いあれ。
葉月君、こんなことやめろ。
Takashina was conscious. As there was anesthesia at work in him, he appeared not to feel any pain in his head. His eyes were wide with fear, and cold sweat ran down his whole body.
救いあれ。
Ignoring Takashina while he pleaded for his life, Hazuki slowly removed a silver shining instrument from the pocket of her white uniform. To be more accurate, it wasn't a surgical instrument. It was a spoon, a regular utensil, the sort one might see around a dining table.
何をするつもりだ。よせ、やめろ。
Wearing an expression of ecstasy, Hazuki scraped out part of Takashina's brain, as if she were scooping up curry. She shook it off the spoon and onto a stainless steel tray as though to hurl it down. His pink brain tissue pulverized atop the tray like jelly. Hazuki jabbed the spoon into his brain for a second time. This time she shaved off a more heaping pile of brain matter. As she dug his brain out, Takashina could neither feel any pain nor lose consciousness. Numbness prevented his body from moving freely, and the only thing left to him was to shiver in terror.
これがあなたの記憶なんですね。
Hazuki Shino, looked up at those images in shock. The four jumbotrons set around the pedestrian scramble. Her own memories were playing out there as a film. She didn't understand how it had been done. It was probably due to Nishijo Takumi's power as a gigalomaniac.
あなたの記憶です。
Nishijo Takumi murmured, head hanging, holding his D-sword. The riot had concluded almost instantaneously. Now silence reigned. Several thousand people, who moments before had been striking out at each other, not caring who they hit, all looked up at the jumbotrons in unison. Those who went pale and averted their eyes, those who vomited at revulsion. The members of the media attempted to fix their cameras on Hazuki. Their brilliant flashes burned over and over.
あなたがニュージェネ事件の真犯人だったんだ。
私の記憶を 映像に投影したんですね。
もう、言い逃れはできませんよ。胎児とあなたの DNA を鑑定すればわかることです。どうしてあんなことを。ねえ、クリム。
ナイトハルト、すべては教祖様のお言葉なんですよ。
Hazuki slowly plunged a hand into the handbag hanging from her shoulder. There lay a NOAA 2 terminal port and a surgical scalpel. Grabbing the scalpel, she laid the tip of its blade against her own neck. As she were a nurse, her line of work meant she was well familiar with the location of the carotid artery. Hazuki smiled at Nishijo Takumi, her kindly smile, akin to the one she gave her patients.
信仰の救いあれ
Became plastered red in her own spurting blood.
エスパーだ。
救世主だわ。
Someone murmured. I realized they were speaking about me because of the countless gazes piercing me. Before a vast number of people, Hazuki Shino had committed suicide by slitting her throat. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to say she'd become a martyr. The choking smell of blood hovered in this place. The riot had now completely subsided. Hazuki Shino's memories of her crimes, which I had projected onto the Jumbotrons, had been ideal for silencing the agitated crowd. Every last one of them lost all words in shock at the video. Hazuki Shino's corpse, still trailing blood, several people had walked up to it. They began kicking her dead body. The dead body of a violent murderer, so they were saying they didn't need to pay it any respect. What would they do next? Decapitate her and hang her head up like we were in the Warring States era? What difference was there between her and the people kicking her corpse? The people were helplessly ugly, myself included. The press swarmed around like hyenas to snap pictures for their next big scoop. About half of them went to Hazuki Shino's body. The remaining half were near me.
西尾君、お見事でした。
今のは超能力ですか？やはりエスパーだったんですね。すごいです。
今日のこの集まりは初めから真犯人をおびき寄せるためのものだったの？
あなたの超能力は何歳頃に現れたものなんですか？
子供の頃のあだ名は神童とか呼ばれたことある？
今後警察の捜査に協力する予定は？
うちの局の番組に出てくれないかな？
They tossed them at me one after the other, words of praise.
西条、よくやったぞ！
たくみくん、こっち向いて。
お前すげえよ！
好きです。付き合ってください。
Words of goodwill tossed at me one after the other. I felt hollow hearing those voices, a false image sculpted by public opinion and a delusionary existence. They weren't all that different, were they? That mirth returned, the enthusiasm they'd shown when looking up at me on the roof of O-Front.
うるさい！
Unable to take it, I yelled.
手のひら返して英雄扱いかよ、バカみたいな！
Tears came out. I was terribly grief-stricken, and it was so terribly ridiculous. I couldn't get by without crying. I'm not a hero.
僕はキモオタで、セーラタンのエロいフィギュアにハーハーしてる変態だ！
Yes, let's just tell everybody this.
18歳未満だけどエロゲーして萌えって言ってる男だ！頭の中じゃ街を歩く女どもを裸にひむいてエロい妄想してる！それが僕だ！
My face went messy with tears and snot. I forgot I was being broadcast live to the whole nation. It didn't even occur to me that I was disgracing myself again. I was incorrigible in my failure to read the atmosphere.
そうだよ。これでも僕は英雄かよ！ 違う。僕は英雄なんかじゃない。所詮、妄想の存在で、希望だぜ。一人じゃ何もできないヘタレだ。
The voices in the area went quiet. The silent spectators, the reporters showing me dubious faces. At the heart of Shibuya, in this wide pedestrian scramble, my voice alone rang out.
それが僕だ。お前らに他人に僕っていう人間を決めさせない。僕はお前らのおもちゃじゃない。見せ物なんかにはならない。僕にはやるべきことがあるんだ。僕はお前たちなんかのために行動しない。
Rimi's smile rose to the back of my head.
僕はただ
For the sake of the one I loved, I would fight and disappear. Before I could declare so, suddenly I noticed how the night sky reflected at the corner of my sight was going white. Not from clouds, and certainly not from out-of-season snow. By the time I realized it was the same phenomenon as what had happened along with the earthquake, it was already too late.
サードメルト予定より早い。
In the beginning, the ground rumbled. The earth began shaking. The white in the sky steadily spread. Next, I was assaulted by a fierce ringing in my ears, a shrill, head-splitting resonance. Everyone around me covered their ears as well. And then... the whole world was dyed a glaring white. Okay, I wasn't sure if, the game was just going to automatically move on, but it wasn't, apparently. So that's going to be it for this episode. This episode went a bit long because I, was waiting for a good, natural stopping point. But yeah, so I'll see you all next time. We are, again, approaching the end of this game. We will probably be finishing it within the next couple of parts, if I were to make a guess. It depends a little bit on how long this chapter is. But I would assume probably within the next 3 or 4 parts, is my guess. I could be wrong about that. I really don't know how long each of these chapters are. But yeah, so like I said, I'll see you all next time. A quick reminder, if you want to stay up to date with what's going on with the channel, I would highly recommend you join the Discord server. There's a link to that down below in the description. That is my go-to place for posting about the channel, so if there's any changes to my schedule and the like, that is where I will generally post that type of stuff. Sometimes I'll remember to, post in the YouTube community tab, but generally I don't. So, yeah. And if you want to support the channel, the 2 major ways to do that are either going to be via a monthly Patreon pledge via, Patreon. That does come with some goodies, such as early access to videos and the like. Or you can support the channel with either a one-time or monthly donation via Streamlabs. If you do a monthly donation, you do not get any goodies for doing so. So that is something that you should take into account. But more of the money you give, even if it's a one-time or a monthly donation, doesn't really matter, does actually make it to the channel, because Streamlabs themselves does not take a cut, and I'm pretty sure the way I have it set up, nobody else takes a cut, or if they do, it is a significantly smaller cut than what Patreon takes. If I recall correctly, Patreon takes a 5% cut themselves. But yeah, so that'll be it for this part. I'll see you all next time. Until then, goodbye and farewell.